Thank you. Member for Petrie.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. This MPI today is the government's inaction as rapidly rising mortgage interest rates are devastating Australian families and households. Moved by the member for Hume, the Shadow Treasurer. And yesterday it was announced that mortgages would see their 9th consecutive rise and the 7th rise under the Albanese Labor government. Now, Australian homeowners are being crippled not just by rising interest rates and higher mortgage costs under Labor, but also at the supermarket, at the Bowser with petrol and diesel, where the Albanese government failed to extend the discounts to people right around this country that the coalition government had did. Their electricity prices are rising, despite the fact Prime Minister Albanese saying that he would cut electricity prices, Deputy Speaker, by $275. But no, they've gone up, up and up. And now gas bills and rent is a huge thing. Now, what did Labor say about interest rates prior to the election? Well, right here in my hand, it was at the Australian Labor Party's federal election campaign launch 2022 in the city of Perth. Yep, the member for Perth was there. He might remember. Thank you, Mark, for the kind introduction, obviously speaking to the Premier for keeping WA safe during COVID. You might have thought he thanked the member for Cook for that as well, for the 700,000 jobs we saved during COVID. But no, thanks, Mark. And he goes on, and part of that speech, this is what the Prime Minister said, and these members opposite all got elected in 2022. This is what he said. Labor has real and lasting plans for cheaper electricity. Well, that hasn't happened. Cheaper childcare, right? OK, even if I give you that one. Cheaper mortgages, says Prime Minister Albanese. Cheaper mortgages. There you go. Well, that's not what the Australian people thought. Cheaper mortgages is pretty clear. This is what the Labor candidate in Petrie says, Deputy Speaker. So on May 1, that's what the Prime Minister says to Australians during the election campaign. We'll lower your mortgages, cheaper mortgages. His candidate in my seat says Queenslanders are getting smashed by the cost of living. We can't afford another 3 years of the member for Cook, names him. Queensland homeowners face having to find an almost $400 a month, he complains about, of mortgage repayments by Christmas on average. That's what Prime Minister Albanese's candidate said. $400 a month? Well, we're now at $1,400 a month. Not $400 a month, $1,400 a month. So if the candidate for Petrie thought it was bad under the coalition government, what does he think about it now under the Albanese government? I can tell you the mortgage increases have tripled, in some cases over $2,000 a month. So the Prime Minister has been a bit cute saying that he would lower mortgages, lower electricity when neither of those things have happened. The Labor candidate also promised that under a Labor government that it would be lower than under a coalition government. And the reality is, for those in the gallery, is that mortgages have increased 7 times since this government came to power. And the impact on that is very real for people in my electorate like Damien and Griffin. $1,000 a month extra, another $12 grand a year. He's saying he's paid $460 extra per fortnight, or $12,000 a year. It's becoming unsustainable, Damien says, and action needs to take place to stabilise lower rates. Quinton in Marumba Downs says, I'm a first home buyer, and my repayments since Labor have come in are $1,700 a month extra, or $20,400 per year. In gross wages, that's $30,000 a year, all under the Albanese government. So this MPI about the government's inaction as rapidly rising mortgage interest rates are devastating Australian families and households is 100% true. 100%. And it's not just mortgages. It's also people renting. I spoke to Daryl Margetts from Scarborough this morning, who's worried about his grandson Daniel, who lives in Clontarf, whose rent has gone up $50 a week. And this is really important because as interest rates rise, people need to be able to put up the rent. Thankfully, they still have negative gearing. If it was up to the member for Maribyrnong or the member for Grainliffe, Franklin or Ranklin, that all would have went in 2019. and people would not be able to write off the losses. Shame on the Albanese government.
And I give the call to the member for Bain.